Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants here at the ITU campus, dear participants online, as I'm happy to see that we have audience here, but also audience taking advantage of our digital presences. I am very pleased to welcome you to a new version of the Network Spotlight. My name is Daniel Krakow. I'm since 2.5 months appointed founding director of Outreach and Startups, and I have the honor to give this event a certain framework. I am sending you greetings from our president, Stephanie Lindstedt. She cannot be with us today, but I'm sure we'll see her at other occasions. But she sends her warmest regards, and she apologizes herself. Network Spotlight is a format that we came up with because we thought it would be interesting on the one hand, but also necessary to share what is actually going on at our university, not only on the student and learning side with our PhD programs, with our upcoming master programs, but also with the research that is actually done, and of course presenting the professors and the work they're doing. And why is this important? It's not only to give like a stage to professors, because this is typically what they are given, but it's rather to dive deep into specific fields of the areas of research. And why this is special? Because the whole research part is also special at ITU. But before I come to the introduction of the research part and the speakers for today, I want to share with you some excitement that I and we have here at ITU, because this will be actually the last Network Spotlight before our inaugural master students start. So as in you can already recognize that by October 1st, we will have the first incoming cohort of master students in interdisciplinary computing, and the whole university is basically preparing for that, which means that education is set up, research is set up, and also all other activities are basically prepared for this really, really important moment for us as an institution. But now on the topic. The Network Spotlight, as said, is here to share or to give a stage to professors, in our case, fellow professors who work on specific fields of interest, and we give a framework for that. When I am asked to refer on ITU, I typically come up with the 3 dimensions: interdisciplinary, international, and also impact related. That means we're putting interdisciplinarity at the core in research, teaching, and across the institution. We are very international with, for example, master students coming from about 20 countries in our first cohort, having about 50 nationalities in our ITU staff, and also having international professors and research staff among us. The impact relation comes from the fact that we actually target to work not only in our laboratories on very specific questions, but also try to look out into the world, into industry, into civil society, into academia, into public administration, to find the challenges that actually move the world. And one of the big challenges that we're actually facing at the moment, we are in a so-called AI era, is then of course related to technology. And when we initially think about technology, we often think about applications and trying out new things, products, services, etc. But when we look a bit more closer on how actually technology or research is translated into products, into services, into where we have touch points in the real world, then we see that there is a very important layer that is needed for this translation. And this layer is standardization, or to a certain part, regulation. And specifically when you think of AI, there are some recent movements, like last week Italy, I think adopted as first of the European countries, put the EU AI Act into policy implementation. There is the EU AI Act into existence since August that year, with a transition period until 2027. So we see that in order to actually create business, for example, or create products that can be used and can be trusted by the broader society, industry, and all of us, those 2 topics, standardization and regulation, are very important. So now introducing the first speaker, Both of them will touch the topic, as you might be aware of, within the framework of our evening. And it's important for me to highlight that interdisciplinarity in our case means a good understanding of AI, but also bringing expertise in another field that has another background, has another domain. So our first speaker will be Elisabeth Staudegger, and her talk will be on the importance and the relevance of standardization. And I'm happy to hand over to Elisabeth, and I ask you for a warm applause for our first speaker.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Daniel, for the very nice introduction, kind introduction. Yes, I am a professor of law at Graz University, and I'm here at ITU as a fellow professor of IT law and standardization. Ever since I've started here at ITU as a fellow professor in February this year, I've learned that ITU pushes forward towards responsible innovation. So thus I thought, being from the field of the law, it might be interesting how the lawmaker, the legislator, deals with dynamic technologies. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about today. So the title of my presentation is Law and Standards in AI Regulation. Before we start, just to make sure we are on common grounds, ITU has not a law faculty, there is not a law institute at ITU, but you all are citizens. And since you are citizens, you are pretty well familiar with a law system, a legal system, the law order. So let me state 3 key elements of the law before we start. Firstly, what is the overall goal of the law? What do you think? Regulation. Regulation is not a goal in its own. What is the goal of regulation? Stability. Stability. Order. Oh, even more, it is peace. The law does not serve the market. It does not serve politics. It is about peacekeeping. So second, what is the means of the law? How does the law reach the goal? Well, by rules. Rules that help to tackle conflicting interests by balancing interests. And third, what is those interests about? Well, it is about freedoms, like freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom to conduct a business, freedom of science and arts. But it is also about protection. To protect against harm and damages of personal integrity, mental and physical integrity, of human dignity. So balancing those interests, freedom and protection, to safeguard peace of humans in complicated and complex societies, this is the overall goal. This being said, let's go deeper. What is the law about? Things became even more complicated when technology stepped in. So from the 19th century, our everyday life became more and more technologized, so to say. The products, the services are provided by technology. And in the 20th century, the lawmaker, the legislator, had to balance again those interests, freedom and protection. And each legislator defined quite in detail the technical requirements of the products. So what happened on the European level then was that, of course, the European lawmaker had to harmonize all those different national requirements because they turned out to become a trade barrier, a market barrier. In 1980, there were 50 directives on the table, not solved. There were 250 cases pending regarding harmonization of technical details. So about 300 cases of uncertainty, unclear. And thus the European Parliament called for action. It called for a new approach. How to come up with emerging technologies that we all want to use, but in a safe, rather safe conditions. The old approach was slow, rigid. It has to be overcome by a new approach. And that started in 1985 when the Council provided a very clear distinction. The lawmaker from now on should focus on the legal requirements for safety and security. So that what is to be protected. How to comply with those requirements was led over to the market and, of course, to standardization bodies. So this is what we call the new approach. How standardization came into play. Those standardization bodies, the actors, are pretty well known. It started in the 19th century. Ongoing in the 20th century, there was the Committee on European Normalisation, in French, Comité Européen Normalisation, and the electrotechnical part of it, CENELEC, and later on, ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standardization Institute. Those three are held to be the European standardization bodies till today. They are held to provide standards. Standards are sort of a best practice. How to meet legal requirements. They are not mandatory. You can use them. What you gain by it is a presumption of conformity. So whenever there is a standard, a harmonized standard you use, there's the presumption that you comply with legal requirements. CE marking. Does anyone know what CE stands for? Conformité européenne. What does it mean?
That it comply with the European standards.
Do you think there is this is a quality sign, so to say, a quality stamp?
Every manufacturer assigns it himself.
Yeah.
But he must prove that the documents comply.
Very well. So this is not an external control, so to say. This is not a quality sign. This is a self-declaration. The CE mark, just saying that a producer provides a product or a service that complies with European legal requirements.
As long as nothing happens, no one cares.
As long.
If something happens, you need to prove it.
Yes, exactly. So this is the interplay between legal requirements that can be brought and forced before a court, and on the other hand, the standardization that is still voluntarily used by providers whosoever. This is just, as you stated, a presumption. It all started in 1980s as well, when we had some products and services held to be specifically risky, like toys, but also some vehicles and, of course, medical products. So those were integrated in that so-called new legislative framework from the very beginning. In a nutshell, it means low risk. There is self-assessment is enough. When it comes to high risk, there is external assessment, control, up to market surveillance. So in a nutshell, a short wrap-up, what is the law about? The law provides legal requirements, what has to be protected. How to protect, how to comply with the provisions is up to standardization. Those Standardization, using those standards is voluntary, but what you gain is a presumption of conformity with the law. CE marking is just a self-declaration, is sort of a market passport, and the conformity assessment may be done by yourself, low risk, or by external bodies, notified bodies, high risk. So this is the starting point. Now coming to AI, a very dynamic technology. Europe is said to be the first region with legal provisions for regulating artificial intelligence. This has been done last year in June. The AI regulation was set in force. The goal is to protect fundamental rights, again, safety, security, health, trustworthiness, of course, to support both innovation, but also competitiveness of EU industry, and to protect EU citizens. The scope is, well, everything, everyone inside European Union. In the very core, European citizens are highly protected. We know that already from GDPR, from the General Data Protection Regulation, with a very similar scope. And in its fundament, so to say, the AI Act is product safety. As I mentioned before, it started with toys and medical products and vehicles. Now this risk-based approach is broadened towards artificial intelligence. You may know the pyramid already. This is provided by the European Commission, which tries to educate, so to say, to inform everyone pretty well about the concept behind the AI Act. So AI is based on different levels of risk. On the highest, on the top, there is prohibitions, Article 5, like a social scoring by authorities, which is definitely prohibited in Europe. There is exploiting or manipulating vulnerable humans, forbidden in Europe. There is real-time remote biometric ID in public spaces. Here are some exceptions due to public safety. So this is the top of the pyramid, so to say, which is strictly forbidden. This is already binding since February this year. So the AI Act was enforced in June last year, but the rules become binding step by step. It all started in February 25 with the prohibited practices. Now, since August 25, the duties for providers of high-risk systems are already binding. So high risk is the next category. This is very interesting. It is a broad overall regulation, meaning everything that is thought to be high risk, like already mentioned, the highly regulated products and services in other directives and regulations, like the medical devices and the toys and so on. But also some very specific systems in specific fields, which is enlisted in Annex 3. This is 8 fields. For example, it is education. It is also work recruitment. It is, of course, credit scoring. It is critical infrastructure. And it is biometric ID and categorization profiling, so to say, which belongs to the high-risk category. And for those high-risk systems, there are very, very strict measures. And then there is the low-risk area, where nearly none of the provisions foresee strict rules. It is more about skills in using AI. It is more about information and transparency in general. Let's focus on the high-risk systems because they are really mostly interesting. What are core obligations for providers of such high-risk systems? As I mentioned, this is binding since August this year. It's already here. So if you want to provide a high-risk system on the market, you should care for quality and risk management. You should care for data governance and storage. You should care for technical documentation logging, robustness, cybersecurity, resilience, and human oversight. So may I ask you, do you know what human oversight means?
A human-centered approach or human-in-the-loop approach for the use of artificial intelligence, so that it is not completely haywire or run by itself, the technology, but also receives supervision from humans.
Yeah.
You can ensure the law and the ethics that to remain as they should be.
Yeah, wonderful. You are from ITU, I guess.
No.
No.
I mean, yeah, I'm there now, but yeah.
You're starting right now your studies at ITU. This is wonderful because it's exactly what we need now. Researchers, students, scientists who have a clue, who have an idea what it could be, that human oversight. Because definitely out there on the market, people don't know. It is legally binding, it is here, it is a duty and obligation, but how to comply with this requirement? It includes, by the way, it includes a red button to stop the system. So, what is needed now? Yeah, again, since this is the law, there is, of course, law enforcement, there are penalties, and this is, like in the GDPR, pretty high. It is a measurement of million or worldwide turnover in percentages. And as you can see, you should take it seriously. When it comes to a court action, it could be very, very expensive. Now, how to help the market providers, producers, deployers to come up with that legal requirements? Think of human oversight. Concretely, in a concrete system, nobody knows exactly. There are already some standards about risk management and the data quality and storage and so on. But some assets are really, really new, like again, the human oversight. And here in Article 40 of the AI Act, there is this interface in between the law and standardization. As mentioned before, the legal requirements enlisted in the Act, but now, again, an option, a possibility to get sort of best practices from those who are pretty experienced with standardizing technological issues. And those are, again, standardization bodies. Here, this, you wanted to ask?
You when you're done.
Here it is exactly about Senelec, the Comité de normalisation européenne and électrotechnique, that got the request for harmonized norms. So within the standardization regulation, the lawmaker empowers the European Commission to ask for harmonized norms, for harmonized standards. And when Senelec or ETSI provide such standards, they are approved by the European Commission, and when they fulfill the legal requirements, they are published in the official journal of the European Union. And thus, when someone uses those standards, harmonized standards, there is the presumption of conformity with the legal requirements, what I tried to explain before. And here again, with Article 4, we do have the same tool set to cooperate, collaborate, to bring in best practices from the standardization community. And of course, there was a request for harmonized norms. The European Commission asked for 10 specific harmonized norms regarding those duties, those obligations for high-risk systems. And it asked already in May 2023. So as I mentioned, the AI Act was set in force in June 2024. 1 year in advance, the Commission already requested for harmonized standard. And there was also, well, the topics again listed here, risk management, data quality, robustness, cybersecurity, transparency, human oversight, and the deadline was end of April 2025. Remember, in February 25, the prohibited systems went into binding force, and from August 25, there are those obligations for high-risk systems. So end of April is a perfect deadline for harmonized norms to help the market, to help providers and the market to come up with the requirements. Thus, mission completed, everything fine? Some love, shaking their heads. But there's, of course, critics. The new approach, the new approach, remember 1985, new approach when the legislator focused on the what to regulate while letting the how to standardization bodies, proved to be not as good as hoped. There are still some regulations on delay. We do have a heavy dependency on private standardization entities. There is, of course, democratic issues raised by that. It is said to be industry-driven. SMEs, for example, are not as much included as they should be. When the European Commission gets the requested standard, they have to prove if it complies with the law. And of course, the Commission itself is not capable of doing so. Thus, they ask for harmonized standards consultants. And what happened then proved that there is, again, delay. So many of those consultants delayed proving the requested standards. And so again, it is a slow procedure to come up with concrete examples in very dynamic technologies. Also standardization, there is many critics when it comes to democratic gap, to path dependencies, and also to the opaqueness of the process. You don't really know who is in, who is deciding for what. Yeah, just to go through quickly, there is critics, there is loads of to do for research here, for academia. Also CE marking is often understood, misunderstood. And when it comes to that concrete example of AI implementation, as mentioned, the deadline was end of April 2025, but we do not have the requested standards until today. So still, despite the legal rules are binding now, the market providers, deployers don't know how to come up with it. Well, at the end, there is legal uncertainty in a field that is pushing forward so dynamically and is urgently needed. So there are many fields of action for interdisciplinarity. Before we go into detail also here, just let me broaden the perspective a little. This was about national legal requirements being harmonized at the European level. Now focusing on the European single market, of course. But of course, Europe is not alone. There is a global perspective. So standardization and the new approach, it all started in Europe. But then it turned over to the United States. And since more than 10 years, who takes the lead in standardization, in fact, is China. And there is not any doubt that China wants a design complying with Chinese values, Chinese interests, and Chinese understanding. At the very beginning of the slide, you see the geopolitical power. Who writes the rules, rules the market. Who rules the market shapes the world. And now again, thinking of Europe as a very rich, highly educated region, depending on products, services, designed by US or China, putting us into a world following Chinese and US values, understanding of how the world should be. Is this what we really want? Well, the European Commission, the European Union, asked for help. In these global negotiations, and standardization is negotiation, it is consensus finding. Experts that go for European standards, standardization in line with European values and European interests, are urgently needed. This is why the European Union called for proposals, and our proposal was to go into Stand UV education. The Edu for Standards project, Vladislav, who will quite after me talk to you, and me, we are in there and try to elaborate a teaching concept. How to educate Europeans going for that understanding of European standardization, so to say, in global negotiation. And again, you can't go alone. You have to find consensus, to convince, to argue, and this is why you have to know about what you want to become a standard. So here there's just some traditional, so to say, research fields. Legal theory should think about the rule-making, integrating private standard setters. It is about social legal studies. It is about rights and ethics. This is all disciplinary, traditional understanding. So like in my faculty, there is the law, and the next faculty is economics, and there is a faculty for example, social sciences, humanities. It's all distinct and separated. But what we need here for this standardization issue is to bring it together. And this is exactly where ITU comes in. ITU is interdisciplinary by design. Daniel, you mentioned interdisciplinarity, also internationality. Austria alone, any state alone, doesn't matter in that playing field. So it is working together. And then think, Daniel, the third issue was interdisciplinary, international, and impact, the impact. So what do you think is better than the brilliant technical solution in your lab? Researchers, scientists always aim at brilliant solutions. You got wonderful labs. I know about robotic and sensors, VR, augmented reality, AR, and so on. And you find some solutions there, brilliant solutions. Are you satisfied now? Is it what you want, what your goal is?
implement it?
Yes, of course. Make it a standard. Make it a standard. Bring it out of your lab into real world. And this is done by standardization. Well, takeaway, ITU, and this is what I'm very, very convinced about. ITU can educate graduates who actively shape the rules that balance innovation with protection, supporting a better world. This is what I wanted to bring to you. Thank you for your attention.
So I would ask you to hold your questions a bit back, also online, and we do an interactive discussion session at the end of the second talk, after the second talk. Because now I'm happy to welcome on stage Vladislav Fomin. Also applause, please. And he will share with us insights into his complementary research field, I'd say, on the specific term of RegTech, so the intersection of regulation and technology.
Well, talking about standards, Elisabeth set a high standard for perfect presentation, so I really feel I can hardly get a CE mark for complying with that high standard. But yeah, we have topics in common. We have interests in common. The education project is one, but we also have, let's say, divergent or diverse interests. And mine is in RegTech, which is regulation of and by technology, and this is what I would like to talk about today. I took some snapshots from my previous presentation, which I made here in April. Was first introduction of my research, and I talked then about technology design and technology implementation. This is my background. My background is studies of IT, information systems, management information systems. Those are the tags that I usually go under when I present myself. What used to be IS, information systems, gradually became known as IT, information technologies. And today, often I hear also in this venue, I hear AI sort of coming as a replacement for what used to be IS, IT, and now everything is AI. But, well, I'm maybe a little bit conservative, so I will stick to IS, IT. Yeah, regulation. Elisabeth gave many examples of how the rules are put down from the government, saying this is what we want, how technology should work if we want to protect consumers, our citizens. But this is, yeah, one of the archetypes, one of the typical forms of regulation when somebody from the top tells you what to do, right? They give you rules, and here I put those colorful shapes saying that those rules can be in different forms. They can be in the form of a law or a policy. They can be in the form of a standard. They can be in the form of a practice or norm. I know in German norm and standard is the same word, but norms here are thought as social norms, how we behave, or practices in organization, so what we do, let's say unwritten rules, right? So when we engage in designing something, developing an artifact, I labeled it as transformation or formation, forming or transforming something, right? Coming up with the new, completely new, or improving the existing one. But when we implement something which has already been developed by somebody else, at least in my field, which is management information systems, we often are driven by the idea that organization must become more efficient, right? Why do we apply technology? Why do we use technology? Because we are lazy, right? We want to work less, and technology does work for us. So we just sit down, relax, drink coffee. And there is even a concept in management, if any of you comes from management studies, that's called management by exception, I think. Basically, unless something out of ordinary happens, as a manager, I have to do nothing. My company works so well. Everybody knows his or her role, and technology helps us in executing the work, right? So this is the idea. But the driver for why should I invest in technology? Because, well, there is a competition. And I just learned that another company applied this technology, and now they can work less than us. So we are competing, right? We also want to work less. Or they can do more with the same amount of resources, right? So maybe I also have to invest in that very same, or maybe I can design my own something which is even better, which gives me strategic advantage, which will achieve even more with even less resources, right? So this is my background. Technology, technology development, technology implementation. And traditionally, if you look at the research and education in the field of information systems, past 70 years, with the first computers coming into organization in 1950s, that was presented and studied and taught as top-down regulation. Basically, engineers go out to the field, they try to understand how people work or what people need to be done, and they inscribe the rules into the computer system. And then people have to follow how computer system works. Basically, people have to follow the rules which are inscribed in computer system, right? And you cannot negotiate. Computer is stupid, dumb. Computer can only do what people programmed it to do. I cannot negotiate with PowerPoint. Just follows the exactly instructions and whatever is programmed into it, right? Or try to negotiate with ATM when you want to withdraw money. You end up in police, right? We just follow exactly the rules which were there. So it's top-down, from rules to practice. Of course, scholars and people, you experience that sometimes we can go around a little bit, maybe. Not with ATM, but maybe with PowerPoint. Yeah. So there are concepts like bricolage, like, I don't know, drift, and what you expected the system will do for your organization and what it does in reality. So you drift it away from utopian or optimistic or idealistic understanding of how good the technology is for you. But still, it's useful. Well, okay, we go with it, right? But what happens? The first important thing, why I'm talking here, I think, it is that with AI particularly, but already before. For example, for me, the first, say, cold shower, maybe as an educator, was Moodle when it was introduced in my organization more than 10 years ago. There are no rules built in for how I should interact with Moodle as a lecturer. No rules for students, no rules for lecturers, no rules for administration. So this is an example of bottom-up regulation. The rules must come up from practice. Nobody told us from above. I remember that time. Actually, I lived through, I think, 3 institutional implementations. 2 times Moodle in 2 different universities, and 1 time MS Teams. And it was exactly the same chaos every time. There was the only one top-down rule, which was use it. full stop, nothing else. Not how to use, not when to use, not in what situation to use, but just use it. Figure it out by yourself. And that's what people were doing. You know, we are smart. We are university people. Lecturers, students, everybody's smart. Right? You can hardly find non-smart person at the university. So local practices, people start experimenting. And this is, I think, in the summary of my talk, affordances. This is a concept scholars came up with, what a computer system affords, what kind of action it affords for you. What kind of value I can extract from it for me. How does it help me? Because if it doesn't, why should I use it? So it's individual perspective. But then I'm not alone in this organization. If I start using Moodle the way it's good for me, tomorrow I will be in conflict with you and with you and with you, because you find that for you there is something else which is a value, which is useful, which is good, right? And then we clash. And there is nobody from above saying us, no, you are all wrong, or you are right and two other guys are wrong. No, we have to come up, consensus was mentioned, we have to agree that from now on, to avoid the conflict and discussions, not to waste our time, this is how we will use Moodle. One of the case studies we used with my colleagues in early years of Moodle, when students was, let's say, first new year with Moodle at a certain university, and after the new year there were many photos uploaded to Moodle with students partying. And then administration and lecturers looked at that and said, no, this is not how we expected to use Moodle. This is not for partying photography. This is for study purposes. So please, from now on, no pictures of private parties in Moodle, only study materials. Okay, but that to become a rule, to regulate the use of technology, this must be formalized and legitimized. So eventually, somebody must say, yeah, we recognize this is how it works. We recognize this is the rule from now on. So somebody from administration must accept. So bottom-up regulation is possible. We engage in it. I have examples with Moodle, MS Teams, and I talked to Gert before the presentation about MS Teams. Here, there are some rules how to use it, but still, I think there is quite a lot of space where there are no rules how to use it, right? And yeah, that's exactly one of the examples. How gradually those rules will be filled. You will see they will be filled. Because why they have to be filled? Because you can hardly find an organization which can afford, time-wise, resource-wise, in the context of potential and real conflicts, which can afford allowing people to work without rules and do something different and keep arguing with each other. This is not how you should use this technology, right? It's just from the point of view of efficiency, which I said is the driver for technology implementation organizations. If you give a technology which doesn't have top-down written rules, how long organization can survive with that? How long before it becomes a major headache for the management? How long before people actually start literally fighting? No, this is not how you use PowerPoint. No, this is not how you send the file to everyone. No, this is not how you announce an event. No, this is not the template that you use for PowerPoint presentation, etc., right? So it must be balanced. Okay, but tradition, 70 years of research and education, no education, no methods, no consulting practices exist today to help you understand, for example, how ChatGPT should be used in organization, because it's also bottom-up type of system. It doesn't have any built-in workflows. What does it support? If you thought that how to formulate inquiry on Google to find what you need, so multiply it by 100, this is how difficult it can be to come up with productive tools for interacting with ChatGPT. It can help, it has great potential, but how do I ask a question? This is not standardized, and there is no knowledge how to develop this. All right, I must move on. I will present you 3 short examples how I use RegTech. And I was lucky because McKinsey, which I often use as a teaching material to introduce some topics to students, it just, I think, a week or 2 ago, came up with this article. What is RegTech? I thought, oh, great, just in time for my presentation. And then it goes that RegTech is a regulatory technology, and it refers to technology that improve processes in financial service organizations. And then it says that it goes back to financial crisis, now 17 years ago, and now to protect the citizens and the governments from bankruptcies of banks and fraud probably. More and more rules and regulation is put top down to the banks, and you must follow that, right? So again, top down from the governments or from industry associations. So those are the rules you have to follow. And that hopefully will prevent from new crises, it will prevent from bad things happening, right? And that the concept that you may find algorithmic control, which is, if you know the history of management and bureaucracy, there was a concept of iron cage, so that professions, people, for example, accountants or educators, lecturers, any profession you take, there is rule of conduct and knowledge, specific knowledge, which establishes how people should act and what establishes the understanding of what is efficient and effective. How can I be a good accountant? How can I be a good lecturer? How can I be a good consultant? And gradually, once we become driven by this idea of I have to be efficient, I have to be good, because every organization wants to be efficient, because it's resources, it's money, it's time, it's competitiveness. And so gradually we find ourselves that we are confined in a cage, which is the requirements for how to act, what to do as a professional. But now, instead of people, this idea of control and efficiency and compliance moves to computer. So what we see, the banks are now not controlled by consultants or by some surveyors or, I don't know, controllers. They are controlled by code. The simplest example, me as working in several countries and the employer obliging me to open bank account in that country, I have to fill a form which is a non-resident bank account. That's compulsory in Europe. And why do they do that? They want to prevent money laundering. And there is a European regulation on anti-money laundering rules and provisions. And it's very simple. If you didn't fill out this form saying that I also have account in Lithuania and Latvia and Austria, if you didn't fill this form for your bank and you send money to yourself, to your account, immediately there is a red flag on the screen of manager in a bank saying, oh, we must check it. Why the money is coming from foreign country to that particular bank account. So very simple algorithm. Incoming money from another country, from private person, check it. Well, maybe there is no fraud, maybe it's completely legal, but algorithm sends, and remember I told you, management by exception. So this manager sits in a bank and sips coffee or water, and then the red flag, check this, check that. Maybe there is 1 million of those checks every day. But that's very common, nothing new, very simple. That's like your messenger beeps now and then, and something comes up saying you have a new message from somebody, check it, right? Okay. So what happens in this case study, what we know that those forms of control exist. They exist as long as computers existed. Computers help people keep control over processes. But we don't know how those new forms with very heavy regulation, let's say, like it is in the case of RegTech in banks. We did a study. The banks were getting more than 1,000 of pages every week of new rules and regulation. It keeps going. It's not like 1 week per year when they get those rules. Those rules keep coming and coming and coming, and you have to comply, or you are out of business. There are penalties. So how do they create a system which can swallow, meaningfully swallow, all those new rules and regulations which come from the top and implement compliance function in the organization? So it's not just keeping programming everything. Before you can program, you must understand what the rule is about. And this is legal language, and this is specific financial language. And those organizations are very often multinational corporations, the banks which operate in different countries. And they have to understand, okay, that part of rule is for that branch, and that part of rule is for that branch. And then depending on what I do and what kind of operations, how do I put onto my systems, which I have many of them in my organization, which support otherwise everyday business of a bank. So I somehow have to put many, many different controls, and they keep changing. So how this new regulatory environment emerges, this is a question for scholars to study and to understand. And this is one study we've done. So very typical top-down, but not typical in a sense that such enormous amount of rules, such big pressures, such big risks of being punished if you don't do. And what we came up with is that it's a very complicated path how you come from rule to practice. So in my initial slide it was simple, from rule to practice. But no, it's complicated. It's complicated because people have to learn about the rules, about what are their capabilities to implement those rules into the systems. They actually have to build new capabilities for implementing those rules. They have to hire new people. They have to create new organizational structure. Everything changes. So it's not just design artifact. It's at the same time design a new organization which can keep on float, which can keep stay competitive and compliant with the regulation. So a lot of things are changing in banks because of the top-down regulation, which is enormous, dynamic, and technology is also understanding of what technology can do, should do, and what I didn't mention so far, when you don't want technology, but to do the controlling. Because actually, those modern technologies in banks today, they literally spy on people doing, if you are a trader, you're not allowed to use private messaging, you're not allowed to, I don't know, go out for a coffee without telling where you go and what you do. It's like you're under, it's like this, not a cage, the glass slipped out of my mind. When they always can see it's a prison with glass, panopticon, thank you. Okay, so basically you are always watched, and you know that you are always watched. And I don't know if you've ever been with this understanding. It's quite depressing that somebody all the time, every second watches you, right? And that's how this software is, how intrusive it is. But just to comply with the rules. Just to comply with the rules. Okay, another example, very briefly, very different. Not dynamic and massive, but very inert regulatory framework. try to make a picture of how many different institutions there are at the national, municipal, international level, protection of immovable heritage, urban heritage preservation. So cities, like Vilnius city is UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means that there are thousands of objects like houses which have to be protected by the government because it's a heritage. But not just houses. It can be just a facade of a house, or a roof of a house, or a door of a house, or a window of a house, or a chimney of a house. So actually there are objects within objects which have to be protected. And how to protect? And why to protect? Well, because there are rules, like UNESCO says it has to be protected, and the national level, they say this is our heritage, and then municipality, which also has to take care of that. And there is a concept of failure by design. Regulatory system has a failure by design, meaning that they set the rules, but physically you cannot implement them. You cannot follow them. Like, how can I possibly, with given resources from the government, let's say I have 10 people in the office which is responsible for monitoring huge city, which is a capital of one of the EU countries, with thousands of objects, and how do I make sure that heritage is protected? And what is interesting, that because those rules were developed a long time ago, like in 1950s or 70s, it was before the computers came to be, and those rules do not recognize the use, or do not legitimize, let's say, the use of computerized tools. So actually the rules are for person with a paper notebook and pen and an analog camera, and I go there and I have some other tools to measure the facade. Has it not changing? The window, is it the same shape? Probably I must also have very good memory. How did this building look last year and how does it look today? There are no changes. So everything was analog. But now we realize, well, we can use drones, we can use some other scanners to take photos, we can use AI to identify windows. Actually, we can measure the size of the window. We can see if the owner of that apartment hasn't, by some will, changed the window size, or put extra frame because he didn't like without a frame. Well, maybe other way around. The frame was reducing the sunlight, so he or she removed the frame. Now it's the window without a frame. Okay? So AI can do that. But the rules do not recognize, if I have to go to the court and say, the owner of this apartment changed the window, which is protected, and here is the evidence, and the court will say, well, this evidence we cannot accept because it's computer produced, and the rules only recognize, let's say, human produced evidence, something like that. So we have technological potential, but the system is very difficult to change. And we thought that standards can be that thing which the government respect. So if we introduce a standard which says how to use technology for urban heritage preservation, and once this international standard is set, and we come back to Lithuanian government or municipality and say, look, there is international standard for how to use digital tools in that task. Could you please revise national legislation so that it accommodates those new methods, technology-based methods and practices? So this is one example how, bottom up from practices, what we've done in the project, we developed a tool. It's called a prototype. We developed a prototype which uses AI, takes digital imagery, recognizes the objects, makes the measurements to compare two sets from the past and from today, and see if no objects were changed in shape and size and volume. Right? So it's, in principle, very simple mathematics, if you can train AI to do, and if you understand how to measure. And so we came up with the list of suggestions or voids, let's say, where no rules existed, and what kind of rules are needed. And this can be supplied as a proposal for a new standard. The rules on European level say that they will consider development of new standard if it meets market needs, and we think it does. So this is a way forward how you can contribute to regulation and change something which is like a mammoth, huge, slow, ancient, but needs to be changed to allow use of digital technologies. I'm running out of time. So I'm jumping onto the third case, which was already introduced, so I can shorten my presentation on that. And this is education about standardization. So European Commission recognized what Elisabeth already presented, that we are sort of behind China or US. We don't have enough experts to contribute to standardization. But we want to do it our way. We want to do it the European way. We want to do it with regard to European values that we cherish. We want to preserve them. So it's not just about being competitive, but this is being competitive in a good way, right? In a way which conforms to our core values, but at the same time protects our European business and market interests. And there are a lot of policies which keep using the same buzzwords, like AI today is used, and they say human-centric, societal dimension, valorization of knowledge, blah, 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 blah. And then when it comes to us as educators, how do I make sense of all those policies? What do I have to teach? Tell me. So this is what we're doing in the project. We're trying to understand, so how as an educator I approach this task? Now, European Commission wants a lot of things. And we developed a letter saying that as educator, the task for me is for all of you guys to move you along this ladder from step 1, where I assume most of you are, which is you have very passive or no understanding about the role of standards, how they are good to us, how they build European competitiveness, what kind of standards I'm surrounded with in my daily tasks at work or at home or at university. To move you to understanding the importance of standards, the role of standards, how they can make difference. Do I have a choice? I used PowerPoint or something else. Is it a standard? Yeah, document standard. There is Microsoft Office document and there is Open Office document. There are two different standards. Once upon a time they were competing, not visibly anymore. But we can find many, many examples in your daily life when you make choices between different standards. Understand that we are making choices, and to understand which choices are better for you as a citizen, for your country, for your region, for us as Europeans. And engage. So this is the ultimate, of course, ultimate goal of any educator is to see students, graduates, to become better citizens. I often have this when students are unhappy. They say, we are the customers. We are paying for the studies, or somebody is paying for them. I don't know. But we demand. I say, no, sorry, you're not my customers. You're a raw material, I'm saying. Because university is like a fabric, like a Kraftwerk. Yeah? We get in people without diploma, and we get out people with diploma. Whom do we get it out to? To the society. University makes better citizens, right? And this is exactly the task we have here. From people who don't understand what standards can do for them and for your neighbor, for your country, for your region, to people who not only understand but actually can go there and make better standards for AI, for learning, for teaching, but also for accounting, for procurement, electric vehicles, many things, right? So this is the task. Okay, I already presented 3 cases. Here was a summary. Different research questions, depending on if you look at top-down, bottom-up, or educational perspective. But it all boils down to interdisciplinarity and different perspectives. part of my title for my talk was, about perspectives, taking different perspectives. Individual, I work with technology, affordances, or a policy, which is a national level or even international level, how to reconcile them. This has not been solved by academia. We don't have theories which explain how you go from individual interaction with computer to a national standard in terms of design, development, organization, how to manage those processes. What happens once I discover some useful way of interacting? How does it become legitimized, accepted by my organization? Will it be exactly the same path in another organization? Will all around the country people start using exactly the way I discovered? No. We don't know how this individual to group, group to organization, organization to region, region to country, country to around the world. So those are things, the perspective. Top-down and bottom-up interaction. How many rules from top do we need to start using MS Teams? How many rules from the top do we need to start using Moodle? How much should we try with ChatGPT before management realizes this is useful, or before it bans it because they see that there are some risks and harms? Now, what is the recipe for bottom-up, top-down interaction in an organization when it comes to technologies which are not the same as ATM, which have very structured user interface? If the technology is just supporting, enabling open interaction, no rules prescribed, no rules inscribed, how do I accommodate it in my organization? What establishes criteria for efficiency? How do I deal with risks? How do I control? Those are open questions. So standards are important here as norms. ChatGPT is a good example. Today, there is a dire need for somebody to start defining those ways to inquire. What are the queries I'm expected or supposed or allowed or forbidden to ask? For example, at this institution, what I may ask and what I may not ask. I know organizations which banned ChatGPT. They started with it and then they banned it. Because then they realized, oh, somebody there knows all our inquiries. They can figure out what we ask. If they know what we ask, they can figure out something about our business. No, we don't want it. Right? Actually, this, I was going from less colors to more colors. Have you noticed that? So this is the most colorful slide I have, and this is the last slide. So my next slide is thank you. And I hope I covered all those questions or topics I had to cover in my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vladislav. I would like to ask you to stay on stage, and I would also like to invite back Elisabeth. So I'd like to quote you on one thing. All right. Universities make better citizens. Wonderful, right? That's, I think, a wonderful kind of roof or a frame for our conversation. So I already learned a lot, but I wanted to ask the audience, are there questions? And I will repeat your question for the online people.
So you've mentioned that Europe is obviously not a monolith, given that it's a continent and it has a large number of immigrants to consider, as well as citizens. However, we already see that China has had some regulations done, and if my understanding of them is correct, it's not really like the AI Act for the EU, but rather just different regulations. So my question is, why don't we follow that same kind of system? Since, first of all, it's very nuanced, and we have already had certain requests that you have mentioned have not been fulfilled yet. And with the rapid development of AI, it's developing faster and at obviously an accelerated rate. So why don't we implement separated, more nuanced laws rather than one big AI Act to cover this very broad topic and very broad technology that is outpacing our capability to regulate it?
So I'm trying to repeat and comprehend this very question. From what the core I understand is, why are we trying to make one big law and norm to regulate AI instead of trying to incrementally or separately try to cover aspects, because the feeling is we're not able to comprehend the whole AI development.
Thank you for the question. It's pretty interesting and brings us directly into the very core center of the problem. So dynamic technologies. AI is just one example. Neurotech could be another. Quantum computing will be the next, obviously. What the European Union did is to focus on the European market. As I mentioned, this is about market entrance. This is about product safety, product also including services. And this is not that new. We do have those examples of that approach that stem from 1980s. So what the European Union did when tackling the AI technology, it built upon the concept of co-regulation, building upon existing directives and regulations, like again medical products and vehicles and toys and so on, and bringing in that risk-based approach. So it's all about the risk. It is self-estimated risk at the very beginning. So risk is defined as a component of probabilities of the occurrence and severity of a harm. As I told you at the very beginning, what a lawmaker does is balance those interests, protection and freedoms. And very, very roughly, the European lawmaker decides there is a red line, Article 5, prohibited. But everything below the red line is allowed. And there's one specific dimension, which is high risk. As I assume as a lawmaker, high risk for harm towards my citizens in the single market regarding products and services, again. So very specific and broad. And those high risks are again closely linked to what always has been a high risk, medical products, for example, or toys, or blah, blah, blah. And then there are some new fields, very exactly defined system in exactly 8 fields. This is the Annex 3. So a horizontal plus sectoral definition where it becomes really risky for citizens. And this is where the European lawmakers provides pretty high requirements. And all the other things, all the other AI systems, well, this is low level. So just inform citizens about and keep it transparent and overall educate your users, providers, etc., employees, the skills they need to act with that AI. So that's it. Is it really that complicated? Do you think so? And the other thing, how to comply, well, is handed over to the experts outside. This is not a lawmaker anymore. What is mandatory is, as far as I see it, if I say it's not that complicated, so it's the scheme. If you go into detail from a perspective of a legal research, it may become very, very complicated. Anyway, most of it seems pretty clear. So about 80%, 85% maybe. And here, experts from practice are asked to step in. How to comply. provide standards, provide best practices. You do not need harmonized standards. You can do it on your own. Like you mentioned, you have a pretty good idea of what human oversight might be. So hands-on, realize it. Bring it into the real world. Did this answer your question? Yeah. Thanks so much.
Would you like to add something, Vladislav? Or will?
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture. I was wondering how we assure enough flexibility is built into the acts and regulation in face of a very, very high pace of technological AI advancement. This is a question. Oh, yeah, it's a question. Yeah.
The AI Act again. Same here, as mentioned, from a regulatory perspective, the lawmaker keeps it rather broad. So risk estimation, approximately, is the probability that harm may occur. Is it high? And severity of the harm, will it be severe damage? And this combination allows you, each of you, for first estimation of the risk. It's up to you to decide, because you know your product, you know your service. But just if your service, if your product is, for example, in the field of education, grading students, then it becomes that high risk again. And here the lawmaker says, be aware, you have to be very transparent, you have to care for human oversight, you have to care for resilience of your system, etc., etc., etc. So just 8 specific fields where you really have to take care. And the other, outside of high-risk systems, it is pretty open to you, to your estimation. But what you have to do, at the very beginning, you have to at least think about it. So remember the GDPR, data protection. What has it been before 2060, 2080? There was clear rule, command and control. You have to do this, you have to do that, and go to the authority. And when you did, it's done. What changed was the risk-based approach. So what you have to do at the very first, if you have any personal data being processed, you have to look on it. What am I doing here? What data? What processing? Who is involved? This is what you exactly know the best. And if this is risky, then you have to take adequate measures so that no harm may occur.
Can it be done in the amount of data that is being added each day, each month? Can it really, is it feasible?
Well,
I'll just repeat, because now you didn't have the mic.
Okay, sorry.
So whether that's feasible with the amount of data added every minute, every day.
I don't know. Looks like after 6-7 years of data protection regulation now, looks as if providers are capable to handle it. Looks as if users, the person that is affected, is able to handle it. We now know about those cookies and what happens if we agree to each and every usage. And I guess many of us do not agree anymore, as we did before. But being asked if we agree, this is new, and this is a result of the data protection regulation. So things change, and in my opinion, in my what I perceive, it seems as if it works. And look around. So California to Japan, they're asking for European data protection, because citizens there want to be treated and protected like Europeans are. And again, the risk-based approach, it all starts with explicitly looking on what you are doing. be it data processing, personal data processing, be it AI systems. It is you who does it. It is you who knows, who has to know, who has to care for it. And this is what I think a pretty appropriate approach, how to tackle technologic dynamics.
I want to add something, which
Please.
I'm completely missing already a long time, but it may be a little bit complex, so I may need some circles until you understand the point. I come from the management side, and I always consider the motivation of actions. We have a clear shift of power from governments to private companies. And when you look at AI Act or general data protection regulations, it is actually not only protecting the individuals, but it is the they try to keep the power in their own hand because private companies are transnational and out of their control. So we have a legislation that is losing powers over companies which are transnational. And all these regulations not only serve the individual, but they keep the power at the persons who are in power now. And when you look at democracy all over the world, it is disappearing. America is the best example for it.
May I add something? Thank you. I agree, and I also think that this is why the approach towards targeting individual responsibility can only go so much before we have to start holding bigger companies accountable and also we have to be more nuanced than the broad approach that you mentioned because of the idea that so many things can be manipulated with the broad approach.
If I may take this. Thank you for the question. You want to?
Actually, I'm not through yet. You are legal law.
I'm a professor of law, yes.
Yeah. Probably 95% of all laws are ex post. So they realize a problem, make a law for it, and it becomes kind of a society consensus that this is good. Very little laws are made ex ante. And when you look at the AI Act, actually it is trying to cover future developments, and there are not many laws ex ante. Most of them are ex post.
What do you mean, just for clarification, the AI Act covers future systems, technologies?
Today we have no idea where artificial intelligence will bring us. We can guess, but honestly, you can study something today and you don't know if this job exists 5 years later.
Yeah. But this is what I mentioned just ad hoc. This is what I mentioned regarding the broad risk-based approach, then defining 8 very specific fields where it is about existing systems. So the AI Act does not go into some speculative futures regarding, for example, a general AI or a singularity or something like that, but keeps tight to the products, processes on the single market for now. This is what I wanted to clarify.
The approach of
I would like to add that
the
in order to
approach
serve the
of risk levels is choosing a meta level that is beyond the technology. They just take as key for regulation the risk level which applies to any future development.
I don't get it. Sorry.
But I invite you to have like this like more getting into a debate, which I think it's lovely to have that, but I also think like our after audience format is perfectly suited for that. So I would invite Vladislav to actually answer the question.
Just a few short comments. I think what slips out in this nice discussion is exactly why or how we are complementary in this talk is the role of standards. And that was presented by Elisabeth, that law says what has to be monitored or controlled or regulated. And then standards say how exactly. So how to make it safe, then that's already not legislators, that's standardization. And for example, the question was like, how do they protect us, or how do we know that the data are handled? That's not law anymore. This is standards. So my company will go seek certification. I will go to private party and say, could you please come and make sure that what I do is right? Because there is a standard which says how to do it in the right way. So if I follow that standard step by step, and I get a certificate, and then anyone comes and asks, are you handling data properly? I say, yes, look, this is the certificate from authorized certifier who is allowed to do the certification, right? So I comply with the standard. And that has been, as Elisabeth explained, for decades. It started with safety. Elisabeth told me the story about steam engines exploding in 19th century, right? When they started to think, okay, how do we make steam engines safe for people? The law says it should be safe, but it doesn't say how. So, right, standardization is the important thing.
Yeah, but I want to stress on one point, because as we know, machine learning and algorithm are not so transparent, and oftentimes we don't know exactly how they operate and how they derive the outcome they derive. So isn't it not a problem to regulate the machine learning, the AI, based on this thing?
Feel free, of course. And if I may, I could step in after you.
Well, okay, so my answer is very short. Elisabeth showed you that there are those high-risk categories. And if you fall,
risk assessment, for example.
And if you fall within one of those, if your business is within one of those areas, and there was one particular requirement, human oversight. That answers your question in my perspective. So it means that when somebody asks how can we trust, well, we don't know, but we will make sure that there is a human who will apply human judgment on whether or not this can be trusted.
Yeah.
Is there a prescription for that? No. It's just like in any job that you do today, somebody trusts that what you do is correct, right? So that's my short answer.
I see.
Well, nothing to add to this. Great, wonderful.
Clear. Yeah, okay. It's not so simple, but the answer is clear.
The question raised before, both of you, because it was also about democratic values, and it is vanishing, when I remembered correctly. So those democratic values, bringing in as much as possible stakeholders, not only into the legal process by voting parliaments, but also into the standardization process, is a value the European Union calls for. So this again means bringing in stakeholders, means also bringing in academia, researchers, scientists with good solutions to engage in negotiation about standards, the democratic principle.
And that also answers your question on how do we make sure that we are protected. But this slide, you are already becoming now aware of those risks and possibilities, and to engage, that's the fantastic desired outcome by the policy and by us educators. So if you can become more engaged, start asking those questions, go and check what standards protect you. And if you find that they are not good enough, maybe you find there are loopholes, maybe you find they are insufficient in protection, go to Austrian standardization body and say, I want this standard better, or I want more standards, I want more protection.
Really, don't
Yeah,
laugh.
and this is not a joke.
Yeah, we had the summer school last week,
And
they
will
were
be
all
happy if
there.
you come there. They will be
Austrian
happy.
Standards was there. Professor Dr. Karl Grün, Deputy Managing Director of the Austrian Standard International, he was there in person, spending days with us, telling us researchers how to write proposals, including standardization as an issue, as a topic, step by step. How to go to the next steps when you're done with your research and the solution is here, brilliant solution. How to go to the next step with Austrian standards. When I mentioned the CEN-CENELEC European level, there's of course a global level, ISO, International Standardization Organization, IEC, and the ITU, International Telecommunication Union. But it all starts from the national level. So it is the national standardization body that feeds into the European and into the international. Start in Austria here. Start with Austrian Standards International, with Karl Grün. I know the door is open, and it is not only open, he is willing to help you to go through that door.
And there's one more thing I learned from him, which is very good for Austria, which probably may be an exception on a European level. But there is a law which says that you will be reimbursed for your participation. Basically, they will somehow compensate for the hours you spend contributing to standard development, maybe as employee, maybe, I don't know exactly the mechanism, but that was said and it was repeated. Somebody asked it, is it true? Yes, it's true. In Austria, we have a law which says that if you contribute to standards development, you will be supported, well, or reimbursed for that contribution, or your employer will be reimbursed for your time that you spend outside of the company.
Definitely.
So that-
National.
Sorry, nearly a perfect closing word, but I would invite one more question from the audience, and then afterwards we go from the spotlight part to the network part, and we can deep down on that.
Thank you. Given the concrete example of ChatGPT, for example, if tomorrow OpenAI decided not to implement or to respect our standards, being ChatGPT such a highly consumed product in Europe, to which extent is Europe capable of facing this rejection?
Mm-hmm. Thank you also for this question. May I start?
Yes. I will.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just, so
I'll
the
add my
AI Act, again, it is a very small part of European regulation. And the regulation also includes, for example, digital services, digital markets. So there was a couple of regulation within that digital single market, so to say. But beside that regulation, there is, of course, funding. So what the European Union wants to rebuild, so to say, is to avoid dependencies that happened in former days. And you are totally right. When you use GPT, you depend on a big, huge international company located not in Austria, in Europe, but in US. The European law is an umbrella protecting you simply because you're a European citizen. But beside that, European Union now is, well, offering loads of money to come up with technical solutions. And again, to build up a European digital infrastructure is what is the goal here. And it needs you, each of us, to bring in our ideas, the technical solutions, but of course also ethical ones and sociological ones. And the philosophers are asked, and economists, of course, and whosoever. Academia should step forwards, actively engaging, together, interdisciplinary, to get impact.
I would like to add just a tiny bit. If I may ask as a counter question, if you, as a pedestrian or maybe a driver or a bicycle rider, if you ever crossed the street on the red or ever exceeded speed limit. And you know, what happens from my theoretical perspective is that when we have those top-down rules which say how we should behave, and something becomes forbidden or unavailable, we are not allowed to use, if those rules don't make sense, then what psychologists say, when rules stop making sense, we don't perceive them as rules anymore. We perceive them as barriers to our own goals. And if I'm standing there in front of red and there are no cars, let's say it's night, and I can see 1 kilometer in one direction, 1 kilometer in another direction, the rule stops making sense. I just cross, right? And what happens if you forbid, you know, in China, for example, I know certain messengers were forbidden since long time. But you have technology like VPN or something else, which, you know, that rule doesn't make sense. So my answer would be, those who want to use ChatGPT, they will continue using. They will find bypasses. Sometimes it's bad because it may be illegal. But sometimes, if you think that, I said in my presentation, we design and implement technologies because we are lazy. And I think this is an example which can also have a good side. So there are two sides of the coin. I'm not encouraging anyone to do illegal things, but very often those barriers which come up in our lives, that's why we keep inventing. That's why we keep finding new ways how to solve the problem. And very often those are technology-based ways. So we find our ways. Yes, thank you.
A very very last remark. You still have the choice. You don't have to use ChatGPT. Right. You can use Perplexity or use DeepSeek.
Yeah,
and I really, really hope there will be a European foundation model.
That's what I wanted to hear. Expectation of Europe also developing our own technology that we extended use. It seems you can use as China or the United States.
Yeah, this is explicitly what the European Union wants as well, and spends much of efforts, much of money in this direction.
And I'll use that to close our live session. Thanks a lot for the engagement. Thanks a lot for the questions, the critical ones, and also the comments and the debating. I hope it's going to continue even here on site. Thanks to the online audience. And I would like to thank, of course, our two speakers with a big round of applause. And we as ITU look forward to seeing you, but also new people in the next upcoming network spotlights. And yeah, I'd like to end with a quote, quoting Elisabeth, "It's on us. We have to use technology. We have to build technology. So let's use our university to create a better future." Thanks a lot.